John Adams said, "Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence." In episode 2, we'll go over the early evidence. Also, we will introduce an alternate suspect, 2 of them actually, who were never investigated by the police. On December 15th, 1994, Joann and Alex Katrinak disappeared. On April 9th, 1995, Joann and her infant son Alex were found, victims of homicide. In episode 2, we are going to look at witness statements, the autopsy report, and go over the evidence found at the patch of woods crime scene. We will also look at 2 persons of interest that the police did not investigate. But first, let's talk a little about some of the ABCs of evidence. Question: what is the difference between evidence, facts, and proof? There is no difference. The terms essentially mean the same thing and are used interchangeably. During a trial, evidence, facts, and proof are presented to a jury through the testimony of a witness. Jurors are told they are the judges of the facts, or in other words, they are the judges of the evidence. They are to decide 2 things as to each piece of evidence. First, is it credible? That is, do they believe it? Second, what is the weight of the evidence? How important is it? In this documentary, we will present evidence. It is up to you, the viewer, to determine its credibility and its weight. Direct evidence is usually perceived through the senses: sight, hearing, and smell. It speaks for itself and needs no inference. A witness may say, "I saw Smith fire a handgun. I heard a loud bang, and I smelled gunpowder." This is direct evidence. Circumstantial evidence is a fact that by itself may mean little. But when we apply our common sense and experience, we can infer facts that are probative. The key word to remember is infer. A DNA expert may testify. The sperm DNA found in the victim's vaginal swab appears to be a match to Jones. He cannot be excluded as the donor. This is circumstantial evidence. Based upon our common sense and experience, we can infer there was sexual contact between the victim and Jones. The law does not necessarily value direct evidence more than circumstantial evidence, and vice versa. According to Andy Katrinak, on December 15, 1994, the day of the disappearance, he left for work about 6:15 a.m. and went to his best friend's house where he had contracted to put an addition on their house. Andy's father helped him, and the 2 did not leave work, quote, "not even for lunch." Andy said he arrived back home about 6 p.m. Joann and the baby were not there. He said he was not concerned because he remembered Joann's plan to go shopping and assumed she had been caught in traffic. About 7:30 p.m., Andy called Joann's sister, Peggy. At about 8 p.m., Andy discovered the basement door had been pried open and was ajar. At 10:40 p.m., Andy first called the Catasauqua police.
County Police Communications.
My wife and my baby have been missing since like 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Andy further reports that the basement door was jimmied open and that Joann had not shown up to pick up Andy's mother to go shopping. Andy also notes 19 of 20 screws on the plywood window covering had been loosened.
We just discovered that the downstairs basement door was jimmied open, and that's really got us worried now. She was supposed to pick up my mom first, but I called my mom, and my mom says she never showed up there.
About 1 a.m., Joann's parents and her sister Peggy arrived at Andy and Joann's house, 740 Front Street in Catasauqua. About 2:40 a.m., Joann's father went outside and discovered Joann's car parked in McCarty's parking lot, about 150 yards from the Katrinak residence. At 2:45 a.m., Joann's sister Peggy calls the police.
County 911, do you have an emergency?
Yes, my sister, Joann Katrinak, has a missing persons out on her. We're at 740 Front Street, and we just located her car next door.
Next door?
Yeah, but she's not anywhere to be found still.
In this aerial photo, you can see a white van parked next to a nursery in McCarty's bar parking lot. The van is the approximate location where Joann's car was found. This is a photo of Joann Katrinak's 1992 tan Toyota Corolla, where it was found. Notice the driver and rear passenger windows have a black flange material around them. This detail will become important. At 5:30 a.m., there is a third call from the Katrinak residence to the police. Andy reports the cordless phone that Joann normally used was dead. Andy went down into the basement and found that the phone lines had been cut.
The telephone that she normally uses in the one bedroom was out when I come home, and it's one of those cordless. I just thought maybe the battery was dead. And I just went downstairs just out of curiosity, and the line is cut. And that's where the forced entry was down in the basement itself.
All right, let me send somebody over. He's 740 front of the house.
This is a police photo of the phone lines to the cordless phone. Andy had tied the phone wires back together before the police arrived. Underneath the cut phone lines was a dirt floor. The police suggested that the person who cut the lines may have left footprints. Andy told the police not to bother looking for footprints because he didn't see any when he first discovered the cut lines. Andy speculated the person who cut them must have wiped his or her footprints up after cutting the phone lines. Stacy Fulper lived next door to Andy and Joann Katrinak. On December 24, 1994, Stacy gave a statement about what she saw on Thursday, December 15, 1994. About 12:30 p.m., Stacy went outside and downstairs to do her laundry. Around 12:35 p.m., Stacy saw Joann getting her car ready to leave. Joann was wearing blue jeans and a black coat. At about 1:15 p.m., Stacy came back downstairs to place her clothes in the dryer. She stated that at that time, at 1:15 p.m., Joann Katrinak's car was gone. Veronica Katrinak is the mother of Andy Katrinak. This is page 1 of Veronica's December 30, 1994 statement that she gave to the FBI. Veronica stated that she called her daughter-in-law, Joann Katrinak, about 1 p.m. on December 15th. Veronica reported that she talked to Joann for less than 10 minutes. At no time during the phone call did Veronica feel there was anything out of the ordinary. This is page 2 of Veronica's witness statement. The first 3 sentences of the second paragraph say, quote, Mrs. Katrinak stated that during their conversation, Joann indicated that she was getting ready to leave right away, and all that she had to do was put on the baby's jacket and would be going shopping. Mrs. Katrinak stated that Joann then invited her to go shopping with her and the baby. Mrs. Katrinak stated Joann indicated that she would drive over to the Katrinak residence and pick up Mrs. Katrinak to go shopping right away. End quote. It is probable that Joann acted like she said. She was going to put the baby's jacket on and leave to pick up Veronica right away. Neighbor Stacy Fulper saw Joann loading her car, but when she looked again about 1:15 p.m., Joann's car was gone. Stacy's observations and Veronica's statement are circumstantial evidence. Based upon our common sense and experience, we can infer that Joann and the baby left home somewhere between 1:10 and 1:15 p.m. These cut phone lines are to the cordless phone Joann was using in her phone call with her mother-in-law. At trial, the Commonwealth's theory of the case was that Patty Rohrer pried open the basement door, lay in wait in the basement. Just after Joann hung up the phone, Rohrer cuts the phone lines, wipes up her footprints from the dirt floor, proceeds up the inside stairs, and forces Joann at gunpoint into her Toyota. To accomplish those tasks in the 5-minute or so gap after the phone call and before the car left seems improbable. And why would a killer have forced Joann into her car? Why not just shoot her there in the house? Other than the cut phone lines, there is no evidence that the abduction of Joann and Alex took place at the Katrinak residence. More likely, in our opinion, is that Andy cut the phone lines in an effort to give a sense of urgency to the police about his missing wife and son. More probable is that Joann and the baby left, quote, right away, end quote, by themselves about 1:10 p.m. If Joann and the baby left by themselves to pick up Andy's mother, it would have been near impossible for Patty Rohrer to have committed this crime. Why? Because if Patty Rohrer had driven 510 miles from Linwood, North Carolina to Catasauqua, Pennsylvania, there is no way she could know where to intercept Joann Katrinak while Joann was driving around the Allentown area. If Joann Katrinak was abducted from her residence, it makes it close to impossible for Walter Troutman to have seen Andy yelling at Joann on Lloyd Street. However, if Joann voluntarily left her residence, it makes it more likely that Troutman actually saw Andy and Joann on the afternoon of December 15th, 1994. In an argument conflict murder, the FBI informs the victim, quote, has the misfortune to cross paths and ignite the volatile, impulsive offender who is predisposed to violent eruptions, end quote. So, if Walter Troutman actually saw Andy pounding on Joann's windshield, then when she drove away, where and how did Joann Katrinak run into a volatile, impulsive, and violent offender? This is page 1 of Joann Katrinak's autopsy. The cause of death is a gunshot wound to the face and multiple blunt force impacts to the head. Defensive injuries include fracture of the left proximal phalanx and contusions on the right shin. This is page 7. The left middle finger shows a fracture that is comminuted, which means it is broken into more than 2 pieces. The right shin shows areas of broad purple discoloration, consistent with blunt force injuries. On page 6, the pathologist notes that the nasal bones of Joann Katrinak were fractured. The pathologist notes that the victim's head suffered 19 blunt force injuries. In the opinion of the forensic pathologist, Joann Katrinak was in a lower position than the assailant, or she may have already fallen to the ground. We believe it is probable that the killer forced Joann Katrinak to her knees by striking her right shin with a blunt instrument. The killer then inflicted blows in a downward motion, causing the injuries to Joann's head, nose, and left hand. We think it is likely the assailant shot Joann Katrinak in the face with a .22 caliber firearm after he or she was finished beating her. The dirt on Joann Katrinak's blue jeans is more evidence that she was forced to her knees. This is some of the evidence found at the Patch of Woods murder scene. Left to right is a cigarette butt, a torn-off fingernail found on Joann's chest, a hair found in her right hand, and Joann's gold bracelet found under her body. At Patty Rohrer's trial, a Pennsylvania State Police lab scientist testified that the torn-off fingernail found on Joann Katrinak's chest belonged to Joann. We think this conclusion is in error. In an August 24, 1995, PSP lab report, quote, "The fragment of fingernail from Joann Katrinak's chest was found to differ from the fingernail and fingernail clippings of Joann Katrinak in size, width of nail, and grooming," end quote. In arriving at the conclusion that the fingernail differed from Joann's nails, the PSP lab compared the fingernail clippings from the autopsy to the fingernail found on her chest. Visually, the manicured fingernails of Joann Katrinak do not appear to match the grooming of the torn-off fingernail. However, there is a way to conclusively prove whether or not the torn-off fingernail belonged to Joann. The torn-off fingernail can be DNA tested. Fingernails and hair are made up of a substance called keratin. Fingernails and hair cannot be tested for nuclear DNA, but they can be tested for mitochondrial DNA. mtDNA is passed to each of us from our mother. So today, right now, the torn-off fingernail found on Joann's chest can be tested for mitochondrial DNA. If it does not match Joann's DNA, that means a major piece of evidence presented to the jury was false. If so, in our opinion, that would be new evidence and could be grounds for Patty Rohrer to get a new trial. Above and beyond a new trial, we think that if the torn-off fingernail does not belong to Joann Katrinak, it belongs to her killer. If so, that means Patty Rohrer is innocent, because that's not Patty's fingernail. She is not the killer. We believe that the fingernail will match the mtDNA of the hair found in Joann's right hand. We already know that hair doesn't belong to Joann or Patty, and we expect the nail and the hair will also match the mtDNA of the cigarette butt. Neither Patty nor Joann smoked. These three pieces of evidence were probably left by the same person, that being the killer of Joann and Alex Katrinak. If so, again, Patty RORRER is innocent. And if Patty RORRER is innocent, it proves that the hairs tested by the FBI were not the crime scene hairs. That is, somehow Patty's hairs got substituted for the 6 dirty blonde hairs found on Joann's driver's seat. This is a blow-up photo of the split ends of one of the 6 dirty blonde hairs found on Joann Katrinak's driver's seat. Notice that there appears to be bloodstains on the hair. This is one of the 3 Q1 hairs sent to the FBI lab on July 12, 1995 for DNA analysis of the bloodstains. In the lab report of October 13, 1995, the FBI analyst explains what he did. Quote, "Several stained areas were swabbed, and these swabs were subjected to DNA analysis." End quote. The K1 sample is from Joann Katrinak's spleen. The K3 sample is from Alex Katrinak's spleen. The FBI lab could not eliminate Joann Katrinak and Alex Katrinak as contributors of the bloodstains found on the Q1 hairs. In the FBI lexicon, evidence where the source is known is given a K designation. The K is for known. Where the source of the evidence is unknown or question, it is given a Q designation. The swabbing of the stain from the Q1 hairs was found to have the DNA from more than one individual. Later, it was shown that the PSP lab scientist, Dr. Thomas Jensen, contaminated the Q1 hairs by spreading them out with his bare hands. The PSP lab scientist compromised the Q1 hair evidence by failing to follow standard lab protocol of wearing gloves. After subtracting the PSP scientist's DNA from the mixture, the FBI lab was able to determine that the bloodstains on the Q1 hairs were from Joann Katrinak. This Q1 hair with Joann Katrinak's blood on it is powerful circumstantial evidence. Based upon our common sense and experience, we can infer that the person that belonged to this hair was present at the killing of Joann Katrinak. We can also infer, based upon our common sense and experience, that a person with 8-inch long dirty blonde hair is most likely a woman. So our killer, or at least one of the killers, is probably a female. In addition, there is evidence that there is another killer, a second killer, who is probably a man. Because of its size and poor grooming, we believe the torn-off fingernail is probably from a male. We also believe the cigarette butt and the hair in Joann's hand are from a male. We now have circumstantial evidence that there may be 2 killers, one male, one female. You saw this FBI memorandum in Episode 1. In paragraph 10A, it mentions that the 3 Q1 hairs, approximately 9 inches long, presently at the FBI lab for analysis, had, quote, no roots attached, end quote. We will have more on this memo in episode 5, but for the moment, let's just look at the top of the page in paragraph 10. It says, quote, victim's vehicle, dirt in undercarriage and on floor of back seat and floor in driver's position, end quote. The baby's car seat was in the front passenger seat when Joann's Toyota was found at 2 a.m. on December 16, 1994. We can see the police theory was the abductor sat in the rear seat behind Joann, who was driving. But the only way for that to have happened is that both the abductor and Joann must have left the Katrinak residence with muddy feet. There is no evidence at 740 Front Street of muddy footprints inside or outside the house. In the bottom paragraph of page 2 of the Joann Katrinak autopsy, it is noted that Joann had mud deposits in the tips of her shoes and in the jeans from the knee down. Also, it is observed that there is mud between the treads of her boots, indicating at some point she walked in muddy material. We think it is fair to say that on December 15, 1994, the ground in the patch of woods was muddy. We think that Joann's car was driven off the asphalt road and into the woods to avoid being seen by those driving by, and in so doing, getting mud in its undercarriage, which as it dried, turned to dirt. We think that once the car was driven into the woods, 3 adults, 2 perpetrators and Joann carrying her baby, got out of the car and onto the muddy ground. The 3 adults got mud on their shoes. Joann and the baby never got back into the car, but the other 2 did, one in the driver's seat to drive and one in their rear seat because the baby's car seat was in the front. Both perpetrators deposited mud on the car floor, which later turned to dirt. We believe this is more evidence that there were 2 killers. The brutal murders of Joann and Alex Katrinak shocked the entire state of Pennsylvania. No case had a higher profile. Yet 3 pieces of crime scene evidence, the cigarette butt, fingernail, and the hair found in Joann's hand, were not tested for DNA. And why would they not be DNA tested? Because this evidence, the cigarette butt, the torn-off fingernail found on the victim's chest, and the hair in her right hand are each inconsistent with Patty RORRER being the killer. The failure to DNA test this evidence is a phenomenon called tunnel vision. It is a subconscious force where human beings reject information that is inconsistent with their belief. Tunnel vision is a leading cause of wrongful convictions. We will discuss this more in episode 3. In 2017, NBC Peacock produced a show entitled Murder in Lehigh Valley, Keith Morrison Investigates. The film gives excellent coverage of the case, and we highly recommend it. It is available for purchase on Amazon Prime. In this segment, investigative reporter Keith Morrison is asking Patty RORRER's prosecutor, Michael McIntyre, why the hair found in Joann Katrinak's right hand was never tested for DNA.
Why wasn't it tested?
Why wasn't it tested? It was looked at, and it was already determined that it wasn't Joann's and it wasn't Patricia's. Who cares
Maybe
whose
it was
it
the
is?
killer's.
Who cares? Keith Morrison responds by saying, the hair could belong to the killer.
But so, you mean the other killer?
The prosecutor responds, you mean the other killer? His statement appears to be a recognition that the hair is evidence of another killer.
So there was somebody with Patricia Rohr? Okay.
Well, I bet.
Does that make her not guilty?
Yes, we believe the proof of another killer does indicate Patty Rohr is not guilty, because it means that not only did Patty Rohr drive over 1,000 miles round trip from North Carolina to Pennsylvania and back, but she also brought along an accomplice. This is not a probable scenario by any stretch of the imagination. The TV show Criminal Minds is about an elite squad of FBI profilers. It's fictional, but much of its content is based on actual FBI profiling. In Season 1, Episode 18, the fictional FBI profilers are in Los Angeles, speaking at an LAPD conference. Dr. Spencer Reed talks about the importance of knowing the victimology, what is going on in the victim's life.
Today we thought we'd focus on what is probably the most important component of profiling, or for that matter, any investigative technique, victimology.
Jason Gideon then addresses the most important question an investigator can ask. Why? Why did the killer choose this victim at this time? Was there anything that provoked the criminal to act?
There are around 16 million people in the Los Angeles metropolitan area. Every time a person is killed, robbed, or raped, most important question you will ask yourself is why? Why did your unsub choose this victim at this time? Was there anything done which provoked the criminal to act?
Yes, an important question to ask is, did Joann Katrinak do anything to provoke her killer to act? On December 20, 1994, 5 days after the disappearance, the police interviewed a woman that was a friend of Andy and Joann Katrinak. In the book, Convenient Suspect, author Tammy Mal called her by an alias, Donna Long. We also identify her by the same alias, Donna Long. The killer of Joann and Alex was most likely familiar with where the Katrinaks lived because Joann's car was dropped off close to the Katrinak residence. Donna Long knew where they lived. Donna Long informs the police that prior to Andy's marriage to Joann, she and Andy had a, quote, brief, intimate relationship, end quote. This is another police interview of Donna Long. This one is by the FBI, taken the next day, December 21st, 1994, 6 days after the disappearance of Joann and Alex. In this interview, Donna Long is at the Katrinak residence, 740 Front Street in Catasauqua. Donna Long talks about going to a medium, a psychic named Miriam Berry, that morning, December 21st, 1994. Donna states she gave the medium a photograph of infant Alex, as well as a ring and necklace that belonged to Joann Katrinak. Donna goes on to report that the medium said Joann and Alex were being held by two men, one whose name was Tony. The medium said that Joann and her father both knew Tony, and Joann's father distrusted him. Greg McCrary, a former FBI profiler, told Judges for Justice that sometimes perpetrators will insert themselves into an investigation. They do this for two reasons: to deflect police away from them and/or to gain intelligence as to what the police are doing. Donna Long's involvement could be completely innocent, but everyone who knew where the Katrinaks lived, a relatively small group of people, should be investigated, especially if they had dirty blonde hair. In this undated photo, Donna Long appears to have dirty blonde hair. We have blurred her image to help protect her privacy. During the Patty RORRER murder trial, Andy Katrinak called Donna Long, quote, "my best friend," end quote. Let us be clear. Judges for Justice is not claiming that Donna Long killed Joann and Alex or participated in any way, but we are suggesting that she should be investigated. Everyone should be a suspect until they are ruled out. No one we have talked to has ever said a bad word about Donna Long. She is well liked, but not so with Donna's father. We have given Donna Long's father the alias of Benjamin Long. He died in 2021 at the age of 82. Benjamin Long has an extensive criminal history. One person called him, quote, "scary, a lunatic, a stalker," end quote. Benjamin Long has an extensive criminal history, including at least 3 felonies and a ton of misdemeanors. Benjamin turned 50 years of age in 1989. This is a list of the 8 crimes that he was convicted of in the 1990s. We put his age at the time of conviction next to the crime. We do not have his criminal record from the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s, presumably because the records were not computerized. From the year 2000 to the year 2017, Benjamin Long committed another 6 misdemeanors and 2 felonies. He went to prison for the felonies at age 77. This is a September 10th, 2002 story that appeared in the Morning Call, the Lehigh Valley's main newspaper. The viewer may want to stop here and read the article. It talks about how Donna Long's father, Benjamin Long, age 63, was convicted of recklessly endangering another person and 2 counts of stalking. This is page 1 of a Pennsylvania appellate court decision of April 19, 2018, involving Benjamin Long trading as Long Nurseries. Benjamin Long claimed that he contracted with a farmer named Lichtenwallner to grow trees on 3 acres of the farmer's land. Nurseries sell plants, shrubs, and trees. Nurseries need inventory to sell. FBI profilers say the killer of Joann and Alex was probably familiar with and felt comfortable in the patch of woods where the bodies were found. Before we discuss a 2007 newspaper article about Benjamin Long, let's take a quick sidebar and discuss psychological projection. In 500 AD, the Babylonian Talmud addressed psychological projection by warning, quote, "Do not taunt your neighbor with the blemish you yourself have," end quote. Psychologist Sigmund Freud noticed that some patients would subconsciously accuse others of bad conduct that they themselves were engaging in. one of Freud's examples, was a woman who has been unfaithful to her husband, but who accuses her husband of cheating on her. All of us can engage in psychological projection, especially if we are in a personal crisis. But it is most commonly seen in those with mental illness, like paranoid personalities, or narcissistic personality disorder, or borderline personality disorder. This is a 2007 The Morning Call newspaper article. In the second paragraph it says, quote, Benjamin C. Long, 68, who was found to have a mental illness, has a history of harassment, reckless endangerment, and stalking, and implicated one of his victims in a homicide, according to police. End quote. Is Benjamin Long subconsciously engaging in psychological projection because he feels guilty about a homicide he committed? We don't know, but maybe. This area of Lehigh County is mostly farmland, but there are areas here and there where there are small patches of woods. Who better than a nursery owner to know these locations? This is a June 9th, 1995 forensic report. In item 18, scientists analyzed the soil found in a tread of one of the boots that Joann Katrinak was wearing. The report notes that, quote, flower parts, end quote, were found in the soil in one tread of her boot. It is interesting because it is December 15th, and it is long past flower season. It is interesting to note that the bodies are surrounded by young trees, saplings. Flower parts, young saplings, wooded areas, a record of impulsive, out-of-control criminal conduct, and a connection to the Katrinaks through his daughter, Donna Long. It all may well be coincidental. Let us be clear. Judges for Justice is not claiming that Benjamin Long killed Joann and Alex, but we are suggesting that he should be investigated. Everyone should be a suspect until they are ruled out. The FBI tells us victimology is the most important thing to look at. In a December 30, 1994 interview with the FBI, a friend of Joann's, Karen Devine, believed that Joann had left on her own. In the 2019 Starz show, Wrong Man, Karen Devine spoke by telephone with investigator Ira Todd. Devine explained that she had visited Joann before Christmas to pay her back $200 that Karen owed her. Joann pulled Karen into her bedroom because she wanted to hide the money from Andy. When Ira Todd asked Karen why Joann was hiding money from Andy, this was her answer.
Okay, now, did she tell you why she wanted to hide the money from Andy?
Because she was putting money aside, okay, to get away. She told me that she had a suitcase packed and she had money put aside and that after the holidays she was planning on leaving.
If Karen Devine is correct, and Joann was planning on leaving Andy after the holidays, maybe on December 15th, 1994, circumstances conspired to cause Joann Katrinak to advance her timeline. And maybe, emphasizing the word maybe, Joann and Andy had a heated argument on Lloyd Street that Walter Troutman saw. And maybe the feisty Joann Katrinak left that altercation bent on confronting Andy's ex-girlfriend, Donna Long. And maybe in confronting Donna Long, Donna's father, Benjamin Long, intervened. And maybe that is where Joann Katrinak had the misfortune to cross paths and ignite the volatile, impulsive offender like Benjamin Long. We don't know, but this possibility should be investigated by law enforcement. This ends episode 2. In solving any problem, it's a good idea to correctly identify the exact cause of the problem. In episode 3, we will discuss why wrongful convictions happen.